former Secretary of State, former CIA Director Mike Pompeo with us here. I'm sorry to keep you waiting so long. I hope you can stay with us a little while. Just from what you heard, I heard him saying it was far from perfect, but putting the blame on the administration you served and on the Afghan military. What do you say?
Yeah, he blamed everyone but himself for what is clearly the Biden administration's responsibility. The tragedy you see unfolding, the videos you see, those things didn't have to be. His point that was well taken, we went from 15,000 to about 2,500. We were determined to get our young men and women out of there, but we did that and kept the country stable. And we did that by creating a deterrence model that protected them, that made sure that we were going to protect our civilians. We went over a year without having an American killed as a direct result of the context of our policy. They knew there was a strong America. They knew we had a commander-in-chief who was prepared to defend and protect our men and women. And we had drawn down to just 2,500, and then President Biden pulled the pin and didn't establish the deterrence. The very failures, he talked about there was no choice, that something was going to happen in May. There was an agreement. The agreement talked about May, but it had a set of conditions. And we were determined that if the Taliban did not live up to those conditions, if they didn't deliver on their promises, then America would impose real costs on them. It's a false choice to say he had to just bail and allow what's happened over these past few days, the horrors that we're seeing. He needs to make sure that we get our men and women out of there safely. I'm glad to hear he talked about doing the right thing by protecting them and using American power to get them out. I can't imagine the Taliban believe that he'll follow through on that. I hope that they do, and I hope that the American military leadership is prepared to do what it takes to protect these folks as we try to get these last folks out in these chaotic conditions that the Biden administration created.
And of course, he refused the advice of his military advisors, of his national security advisors, all of whom were saying, do not do it the way you did it. Now, he admitted that it was messy, but that's about as far as he went. He claims that the airport is now secure and that the embassy operations have been moved to the airport. From all the indications we get, it looks like it's far from secure.
Yes, look, the mere fact that he had to send 5,000 folks in is an admission that their strategy, their policy, their execution of this plan was horrifically calculated, right? You would never send folks back in that you had just pulled out. And so while he tells everyone, well, this is just going to be for a limited time, I hope he's right. I want to get these folks out. I want to get people out safely. But there's no indication that these folks understand that there's a strong American leader. I hope President Biden can right that ship. But the fact that we are having to send incremental troops back after we had just gotten them out of there. We had stable conditions with 2,500 people. President Biden wasn't able to do the same.
He talked about human rights as well, which was ironic because right now our reports are the Taliban is going from house to house to try to track down and we assume execute people that worked with the former government there. So there is a human rights catastrophe unfolding on the streets of Kabul and many other streets and cities within Afghanistan, as far as he can tell. But he claims that through diplomacy, he will be able to follow through on his commitment to human rights. Do you agree that's possible?
Well, David, we wanted to get folks out of there, too. The mission set was very clearly to make sure there wasn't an attack from this place, from Afghanistan, from the caves in Tora Bora in the east or along the Pakistani border. That was certainly the American vital interest there. President Biden correctly identified that. But make no mistake, the execution of our withdrawal, the disorder, the chaos, the fleeing of the Afghan president, all of those things were things that were entirely predictable. There were things that could have been foreseen, and he hasn't accounted yet for the fact how he could not have expected that this would happen, and the human rights abuses that will take place in the immediate aftermath of such a poorly executed withdrawal from Afghanistan will be staggering.
And of course, the fear of what comes next, in particular terrorism around the world. We know that the jails were opened up by the Taliban as they captured city after city. Al-Qaeda members were released. Other terrorist groups were released as well. We even had one former member of Gitmo, of the terrorists that have been kept at Gitmo for eight years, was in the president's office. How do you think that will be unleashed now, this massive increase in the number of terrorists that are given free rein in Afghanistan?
Well, there are two pieces to this. There's the near-term piece. You talk about the particular members of Al-Qaeda or the Haqqani network that may now be free. We need to make sure that we know where they are and we track them. We need to make sure that we leave the resources there to understand the risk that emanates from Afghanistan. I don't know what their plans are. I don't know if they're going to leave an intelligence capability to deliver on the over-the-horizon tools that he described. I hope that they are. I know that there was a plan in place to actually deliver that. We'll see if the Biden administration actually does that. But to your point, well taken too, there is a second-order impact that is larger than Afghanistan. These are terror organizations around the world, including the Iranian regime, that can see that this is not an administration that understands how to create peace and reconciliation and to use American power to deter those threats. This isn't the first breach of this, right? Remember, there were Iranian missiles that flew from the Gaza Strip into Israel just weeks after President Trump and I left office. That's the kind of failure of American leadership. It is the kind of perception from our adversaries and terrorists around the world that leads to more risk. Weakness begets war. Deterrence comes from strength. This administration has each of those exactly backwards.
And of course, the first target of terrorists, and they're already there, they've been acting over the past couple of years, is Europe itself. The president went to Europe recently, said, this is what American leadership looks like. I'm imagining a lot of Europeans are much less comfortable with that phrase now than they were before.
Yeah, that's probably true. Although I must say, the Europeans were great partners. There were NATO forces there on the ground alongside our men and women for an awfully long time. They fought bravely as well. But the real cost, the real burden of the work in Afghanistan has always fallen to the United States of America. And so it's our responsibility to make sure we get that right. I'm sure that the Europeans can see that President Biden wasn't able to execute in a way that was materially important to them. And I think for that failure, you're right. They will, in future engagements with this administration, understand that there is real risk that America will walk away from its important interest and leave them in a place that is even more difficult for them.
And there's also the question about China and Russia now, our adversaries, if not our enemies. Many people think China more and more is becoming one. Will they now recognize the Taliban, and how are they able to leverage that against us?
Well, I can say this much. The Taliban aren't looking for international recognition. I saw Speaker Pelosi say that we'll have to see how they behave. This is not a regime. These are butchers. These aren't people who care about a seat at the table at the United Nations. So that's kind of a silly idea. As for how China and Russia will respond, there's no doubt the Chinese will be worried about the presence of terrorists there as well. It puts them at risk also. But I'm confident they will try to use their economic power in the very same way that the Chinese Communist Party has threatened the United States from other places in the world. You can imagine they will now see this as an opportunity for themselves as well. And we need to be serious about how we respond to China, not only the actions they take there in Afghanistan, but all the other places they are active throughout the entire world.
And Secretary, you've been very generous with your time. I know you have to leave, but culpability, there were questions about who's to blame for all this. Obviously, the execution falls on Biden's watch. But so many people, even those who were ardent supporters of President Biden, are now saying that it falls on his watch. Obviously, you're defensive about what happened during the Trump administration, but how would you have handled things differently?
No, I'm not defensive at all. I know precisely how we handled it. And I know that we drew down 12,500 people and didn't have a single American killed by these very same Taliban butchers. We had a model where we'd made clear what our red lines were. We'd made clear the things we were prepared to do to defend them. We could have executed a plan in a way that would have led to the orderly withdrawal. We would have demanded that the Taliban actually deliver on the conditions that we laid out in the agreement, including the agreement to engage in meaningful power sharing agreement, something that we struggled to get them to do, but made clear that it was going to be a requirement before we completed our requirement to fully withdraw. We would have gotten those conditions right. We would have held the Taliban to those limits, and we would have been able to prevent, in all likelihood, precisely what you're seeing unfold today in Afghanistan.
By the way, you're talking to the father of a Marine who spent a year in Afghanistan. How would you speak to the rest of the families and the men and women who served over there?
So I have lots of friends who served too. I was a young soldier a little while ago myself. These are heroes. They served America well. The mission to destroy al-Qaeda's presence in Afghanistan was powerful and effective. We delivered on that commitment. They should feel proud of the work that they did. whether their service was in Afghanistan directly or in support of our young airmen, sailors, Marines, and soldiers who were serving and fighting in that place. God bless them for what they did. They should be proud of the work that they did.
Thank you for that. Secretary Mike Pompeo, wonderful to see you. Thank you again for staying late. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Coming up.